Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development Webinar Series. In this webinar, Joel Stepanek will offer strategies for bringing Eucharistic renewal to your parish. My name is Erin Pierce. I am the Parish Ministry Resources and Special Initiatives Manager at Ave Maria Press. Let me go back here. Okay. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions may be sent to our presenter using the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel, and I'll read as many of those as possible at the end of the presentation today. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you via email tomorrow. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenter today. Joel Stepanek is Chief Mission Officer for the National Eucharistic Congress. He has more than 15 years of experience in ministry and previously served as Vice President of Parish Services at Life Teen International. Stepanek speaks internationally to groups of all sizes, ages, and vocations, and is the author or co-author of a number of books, including Beginning Well, Chasing Humility, True North, The Greatest Job on Earth, and The 99. Stepanek earned a master's degree in religious education with an emphasis in youth and young adult ministry from Fordham University, and a master's degree in organizational leadership from Colorado State University. He has also served as an adjunct faculty member at Franciscan University of Steubenville. Joel, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thanks, Erin. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter.
Wonderful.
Okay, there you go. I'm going to let you take it from here.
Great. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who are out west like myself, I'm in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. You've just crossed over into the afternoon. Thanks for spending lunch with us. And for those of you who are in your afternoon cup of coffee, maybe out in the Central Mountain or even the Eastern time zone, it's good to be with you as well. We're talking about Eucharistic renewal, and I'm really grateful for Erin reading my bio. But my new profession, the new thing that I do, I consider myself a revivalist in this moment of Eucharistic renewal and revival in the United States. Before we dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about what this revival is and why revival. So the work that I do now is with the National Eucharistic Congress, which is a part of the bigger work being done in the National Eucharistic Revival. This may be something you're familiar with or you've heard about. The National Eucharistic Revival is an initiative and effort, not a program, but a movement, really, a movement of the Holy Spirit to reinvigorate Eucharistic worship and Eucharistic devotion within the United States, brought about through the wisdom of the Catholic bishops in the United States. Some of you, if you work at a diocesan office, may have already been participating in some of the activities of the Eucharistic Revival. And those of you who are at a parish are about to hear a lot more about the revival in the coming year as we enter into a period of parish renewal and parish revival in the Eucharistic Revival. But why are we talking about this? Why revival in general? For some of us, we may know that there have been studies recently that discuss religiosity among Catholics, specifically within their belief of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist and the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, and how that belief has declined. Some of those studies would suggest that as few as 30% of Catholics, these are people who, again, I think there's an important point to be made here. These are folks who, when you ask them what their religion is, they say Catholic. And in the past, 10 years ago even, you may have folks who say, hey, what religion are you? And they don't practice the Catholic faith. They don't go to Mass. They may not even be, Christmas and Easter Catholics, but they would still say, oh, I'm Catholic. It's just a cultural thing. That has declined in the last 10 years. So if somebody is not practicing their faith, it is less likely that that person is going to say, oh, I'm Catholic, but I don't practice. They're just going to say, I don't have a religious preference. So I'm pointing this out because when we look at these studies, we may, as a defense mechanism, say, oh, but a lot of those people probably are like Christmas and Easter Catholics, right? They don't even attend. They're not practicing anymore. So that skews the data. Not necessarily. Many of these folks attend Mass by their self-reporting at least once a month. So we're not talking about people who have completely fallen away from the church but are still holding on to the name Catholic. One, that doesn't happen as frequently anymore. And two, part of the survey data does indicate that these are individuals who still are attending Mass with some kind of regularity. So these statistics ought to alarm us, and they did alarm the bishops, who then through prayer determined that we need to have an intentional focus on what revival can look like here. Why do we need revival? Because our belief in the Eucharist is the thing that defines us as Catholics. Jesus says that when salt loses its flavor, when salt loses its taste, when salt loses its saltiness, what do you season salt with? It's not good for anything at that point. And this is true for us as Catholics. When we lose our orientation and our anchor in the Eucharistic sacrifice, the source and summit of our faith, we lose the guidepost, the orientation, the very thing that makes us Catholic. And nothing else matters at that point. You can't gain a Catholic identity back if you've lost that saltiness through anything else. You just can't. Once we lose that, we lose the very character of who we are. So we need this renewal and this revival. But here's the thing about revival. It's not a program. It's not another thing you buy. It's not an effort. It's a movement. And it's something that happens interiorly here first. And if that can happen interiorly here in each individual, then that does something beautiful exteriorly. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how we bring about a change in hearts, that our hearts would become on fire for our Eucharistic Lord, and how that spills out into our parishes, our families, and our communities. What we're talking about here really is change, and change within culture. And if you want to read up a little bit more about a Eucharistic culture at your parish, Ave Maria has got some wonderful books about that from Timothy O'Malley that I'd urge you to check out. They're practical, they're well written, they're short. But I do need you to know this about changing culture, period. This requires time and intentionality. Your parish has a culture. Whether or not you've discerned one or you want to have one, a culture exists. There may even be a unique culture within your staff and a culture within your parish. And maybe it's one you like, maybe it's one that you don't like. Is your culture Eucharistic? Do you have a culture that's centered around Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, that's centered around Mass, the liturgical celebration? And maybe you're looking at your parish culture, even you're thinking about it right now, and you're like, I don't know that it's there. Think about your parish staff. Does your parish staff have a Eucharistic culture? And maybe you don't feel good about the answer that's coming up in your head. Or maybe you're thinking, well, I think in general, yes, but I think it could be better. That's what we're going to discuss here today, because fostering renewal is really about cultural change. And cultural change requires time and intentionality. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. And it's something you have to be diligent with. You have to keep pushing what I'm about to suggest forward. And additionally, you're going to need to pick and choose your battles at first, because too much change at once creates what's called change turbulence. If you've worked at a parish, or maybe you don't work at a parish as your full-time job, maybe you have a different job, but you've been in an environment, an organization, where suddenly the boss or your manager or leadership or whoever decided that they were going to make a bunch of changes all at once. We're going to do everything differently. It's all going to be new. It's all going to be different. We're going to use a different email, and we're going to start using this other system, and we're all going to get new computers. And by the way, here's a new process for how we're going to handle X, Y, or Z. Doing all of that at once creates change turbulence, which leads to ineffective change. It's too much for people to handle, and it's often too much for us to really manage well. What ends up happening is certain things start to slip. We can't give them the intentionality that they need. And without that intentionality, what that communicates to all of those folks that we're trying to bring this change to is that none of this change is actually very important. See, when we put forward too many different things and we say we're going to make all of these changes, inevitably some of those things are not going to happen, or they're not going to happen as fast, or they're not going to happen as well. And in that case, those pieces start to prove like, oh, well, this doesn't seem to matter as much, or this isn't going as well because we can't manage it. And so what people start to think is, well, is any of this really thought through? Does any of this make sense? And then people start to say the worst thing they can say whenever you're trying to change culture, which is just give it some time. It'll go back to normal. It'll go back to the way it was. Just ride it out. That is the worst thing that you can hear. If we want to bring about Eucharistic renewal, we have to keep these two things in mind, that the change we want to bring about, the renewal we want to bring about, takes time and intentionality. And then if we try to change too much, I'm going to give you a couple different suggestions. If you try too much of this at once, it's going to be ineffective and you're going to fail. So let's dig in. The first question you need to ask yourself as we lean into how we foster Eucharistic renewal at our parish is to ask what God is already doing. One of the beautiful things about Eucharistic revival in the United States is that Eucharistic revival is happening, right? You've probably been a part of some of these movements of Eucharistic revival, these sparks and wildfires that exist in the United States already. You've probably been to a moment of Eucharistic adoration, maybe at a conference or maybe just at your church. You've probably attended a beautiful liturgy that brought you into the sacred mystery of Mass. Maybe you've taken part in a Eucharistic procession that was life-changing. You've had these moments. I've had these moments. So revival is already happening in our United States. It's probably happening in places at your parish as well. Identify what those sparks and those wildfires are. Are there places that the Eucharistic culture you desire for your parish is already being lived out? Do those things exist? Because if so, you're going to want to collect those pieces of flame and kindling and give it more oxygen so that they can burn brightly and that they can influence what you're going to be doing. But you don't want to negate them. So if you come in and you're thinking, we've got to do some new things, there may be groups already at your parish that are doing something cool. Talk to them first and learn from them. That is the first key. What does your pastor think about some of these things as well? What is God already doing in his heart, and what is God calling him towards? Because he's going to be a first part of our step number one. Think about lex credendi, lex orandi is a fun little Latin phrase. So the law of belief and the law of prayer. These two things go hand in hand. Here's what they mean. It's simply put, and perhaps with kind of a fun analogy for our 2023 world, if an alien species were to suddenly beam down and come to your Mass, not understanding the human language, but understanding perhaps some universal signs of devotion, could they understand what was happening at the Mass, what was important? In fact, maybe even better, because aliens may or may not exist. But let's just say that somebody with no religious formation, no religious upbringing, just a human formation in their lives, stumbled into a Catholic church during Mass. Could they, by their just observation of people's faces, of how people prayed, of the types of prayer that was said, of the decorations in the church, of the music that was used, could they identify what was most important to you, what you believed, what this group of people believed? That's a practical image of lex credendi, lex orandi, that what we believe is reflected by how we pray. So now here's the conviction moment. If somebody walked into your church, no experience of the Catholic faith, maybe not even a knowledge of Jesus, and they walked out after a full Mass, what would they say was the most important? Would they say it was the moment of the Eucharistic liturgy? Would they say, well, the high point really seemed to be when the priest, or when that guy up front elevated that, it's like a tiny, looked like a tiny, white circle. He held that up and everybody, there was like I felt it. I don't know what that was, but I felt like that was kind of a moment, Or would they say, I don't know, the people in there didn't look very happy. The priest kind of looked like he was just going through the motions. I didn't feel a lot of joy there. The music, oh yeah, all right. These are questions we've got to ask about our liturgies. Here's the thing. When I talk about liturgy, I'm talking about beautiful liturgy, reverent liturgy, because that communicates truth. And so there's three questions practically we want to ask, because the first step to renewing Eucharistic devotion, to Eucharistic renewal at your parish, is the liturgy. Most of your parishioners, this is where they come in contact. It's the only thing they come in contact with at your parish. They don't go to men's groups. They don't go to clubs. They don't go to extra events. They go to Mass. That's it. This 1 hour, 75 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, depending on who's preaching that week, is all that they get as an interface with the parish, and all that they get as far as catechesis. It's the only teaching moment they get in the week. Are you using it to teach? So ask these three questions. Music, the music you're using, does it elevate the liturgy? Does it make it beautiful? Does it help it? Does it help people pray? Does it help people worship? So this can come down even to the language used. Is the language used worshiping God, or is it worshiping ourselves? I think that's sometimes there's good music that we can use to pray, and music we can use to reflect. Not all good music is good music for liturgy. Some music is better for maybe just worship sessions, for private devotions, for private reflections. but not all music is good for liturgy. Music and liturgy should direct our attention to God and be directed towards God. If we find ourselves singing songs about ourselves and us as a community, that's not necessarily elevating worship. It might be turning us inward. Preaching. Does our preaching inspire and teach? If you are a priest, do you have people that you can ask honestly how your homilies are week to week? Some priests are gifted preachers. That may be you if you're watching this. But some priests maybe say, this just isn't my gifting. That's okay. Not every person is going to be an amazing, incredible preacher. But I really believe that any person can become a good speaker and a good preacher if you're humble enough to ask for help. If you're humble enough to ask people, hey, what did I get right this week? What did I do wrong? In preaching, less is sometimes more. A smaller message that's inspirational and that's instructional sometimes can be better than a 20-minute homily that tries to do too much. If you don't know whether or not you're hitting the mark with your congregation, ask a few people and make sure you're asking people from different demographics how they're being impacted. This is the only piece of the liturgy that has high flexibility. It's the only time of the liturgy that you get to craft the script. It's the only time in the liturgy that you can really teach in a substantial way. And remember, for most of your congregation, this is the only interaction and catechesis they will get all week. And then the last piece is looking at liturgical actions. Do they direct our attention or do they distract our attention? When we think through what we're doing, any movement, how the acolytes are moving, how the altar servers are moving, how the priest and the deacon are moving, all of those things can have an intentionality because they can either become very distracting or they can become very intentional. These are places where we can also think about how we teach the liturgy. There can be moments where we say, okay, is there an organic way to lean in and instruct in these liturgical actions? When we teach the liturgy, I think this is something we have to constantly be mindful of because the Mass, it's kind of like next level stuff. We're not like a non-denominational church where you can just invite somebody to our Sunday service and it's full of stuff that they get. Oh, there's music and here's prayer. I'm kind of familiar with prayer. And there's somebody speaking and they're speaking a message. Mass requires a little bit more. And if we teach people where we can and we form our community and understand the liturgy, we can help that experience go deeper for them. So there's 4 points I want to hit here. First is how we form our members versus seeker expectations. Several years ago, I wrote an article in the bulletin of my parish talking about how we dress for Mass. I think that it's important that we're aware of just how we're preparing ourselves for liturgy. And so I wrote up a note about just how we're mindful of how we prepare and how we dress and how we present ourselves for liturgy. And an individual came to my office so upset, crying. This person was so upset because this person felt that the bulletin article was going to push people who are far away from the church away, that they were going to read this and think, oh my gosh, what an unwelcoming church having, this article about how we dress, which is fair. But as we talked about it, I said, well, let's consider the medium. Do you think that somebody who hasn't been to church in 6 months, a year, 5 years, maybe who has some struggles with the church, is going to pick up our church bulletin and read it? Probably not. They agreed, and we were able to reconcile in that moment. That's an example of having member expectations. Where are we forming people within who are regular Mass goers to understand how they approach liturgy? Where we find attention, though, is recognizing that we can't just offer blanket statements or post a sign out in front of our door saying, this is the dress code for Mass. And if you don't show up like this, you're going to get expelled. I came across a story that was older from several years ago about a priest who got up to preach his homily and discussed how the prior week, a woman had arrived with her child. This is several years ago, so she didn't have a head covering on, and she was not wearing a dress. She was wearing slacks. And so outside of the dress code or the commonly understood dress code for this parish, and that somebody chastised her heavily and she left. And the priest gave up and gave a homily saying, I don't know who did that, but whoever did it, you know who you are. For the rest of your life, you will pray for that woman and her child and for their salvation. Because of your decisions, it may be at risk. And then sat down. That was the homily. So that's good member expectations versus what do we expect from people who are seeking? there's a rub here, right? Because like people show up, but we don't know who's in and who's out. And we want to have clear-cut boundaries of how do we approach the liturgy. But we have to embrace a tension between how do we welcome people who have been away, who don't know, who haven't been formed yet, and how do we ask more of the people in the pews? I think it happens to coincide with forming a mindset of welcome in our community. Are we continually inviting people to invite other people? And are we creating a place that's hospitable? Several years ago, I invited a couple of my friends to join me at a mass. They arrived before I did, and when I finally got there, they were sitting in one of the back pews, and they were laughing. And I said, "What's so funny?" And they said, "Well, we sat down at a pew up there, but then a person sat down next to us and told us that we were in their spot, that they paid rent for this particular pew." Now, this person, I'm assuming, was thinking that their weekly offertory envelope was actually pew rent, and they were paying for that spot. Okay, now my friends are good natured and we kind of had a laugh about it, but let's say that that's a nervous seeker showing back up to church after years of being away. Their mom has passed away, their mom loved the Catholic Mass, and this is them making an effort. And what they get hit with is somebody saying, "I'm sorry, but you're sitting in my seat." Culture formation takes time and intentionality. Does your congregation understand and have a mindset of welcome? All are welcome in this place. How do I invite them in? How do I receive them hospitably? When we talk about how we form people, we want to have zero assumptions of the people showing up at Mass. Maybe everybody there knows what's going on, but are there little places and places where it's appropriate to offer organic interludes and instructions so people know what's happening around the liturgy, and that people who may be unfamiliar with our parish know even the most basic things of where to go for communion and how some different things work. These are pieces we can't forget because they create that mindset of welcome, but also teach us how we bring people in. This will become important in just a couple of minutes. The second thing we can do, so lex credendi, lex orandi, do we pray as we believe? The second thing is to create places of encounter in our parish. We can do that through moments of Eucharistic adoration, looking at moments of Eucharistic procession, and offering the sacrament of reconciliation, the sacrament of confession. Adoration is a key piece to helping us grow in love and devotion to the Lord. It offers a place that people can come and not just be in a holy place like the church, but in the very presence of Jesus Christ. A couple of weeks ago, I was traveling and I was by myself and had a long gap of time between when I landed and when I needed to be at the event where I was speaking. And a friend and I were going to grab some lunch, but something came up with his family, and so he had to leave much earlier than we anticipated. Found myself with a lot of time. So I typed into Google Maps, where's a Catholic church? And there was one about 9 minutes away. And when I rolled up, there was a large, I didn't know, I'm just going to go, I'll check it out. When I got there, there was a large and prominent sign pointing to the Eucharistic Adoration Chapel, which was open. There were 3 adorers there. And I was able to spend an hour just completely unexpectedly in my day with our Lord. Having that told me something about that parish, that there's a place where you can go and find Jesus. And for me, an itinerant Catholic, it was incredibly comforting. What does your church offer as far as availability for people to come and adore the Blessed Sacrament? Maybe you don't have the ability to do 24 hours of perpetual adoration. Is there a place you could start? Don't let the big goal distract you from where you could be. This parish did not have 24-hour adoration. It was from like 6 a.m. until 11 p.m., but they still had it. Could you offer something like that? Could you offer blocks of adoration and start to invite people in to spend a few minutes of their day with the Lord? If your parish has never done a Eucharistic procession, could you look at doing something this year, perhaps on the Solemnity of Corpus Christi, where you bring Jesus out into the streets? These can be powerful moments of impact. I was up in the Diocese of Helena, Montana, and they just were sharing with me about a Eucharistic procession they had in their diocese. And at one point, they went under an overpass where several displaced individuals were living. And these folks got up and stood and watched the monstrance go by. It turns out they were former Catholics, and they spoke to some of the people processing with the Blessed Sacrament and said, "Thank you so much for bringing Jesus to us. Nobody comes to us, but you brought him to us." We never know who we might impact when we bring Jesus out of the tabernacle and into the streets. And then finally, ask yourself how you offer the sacrament of reconciliation. The church teaches that we are in a state of grave or mortal sin. We need to abstain from the sacrament of the Eucharist. Now, when we teach that, we teach something about the Eucharist. Not that Jesus is rejecting us, but it's a check on our pride to say, do you believe that approaching the Lord, you want to do that with a pure heart? Or are you approaching the Lord and saying, I deserve you. You owe yourself to me regardless of where I've been. And this can be kind of a tough teaching, but I want you to think about the implications of it, even from ourselves. And maybe the Lord offering us a mercy here to say, listen, if you are in a state of grave or mortal sin in particular, the grace of the sacrament, not only will it not be efficacious in you, it could actually be harmful to you. This is biblical, and St. Paul speaks about this. Here's the rub, though. We have that teaching, and it's an important teaching because it teaches us something about the Eucharist, because this is Jesus Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity. It challenges us to that belief and to say, if that's Jesus, I want to bring forward to Jesus a pure heart and not my pride. But when we offer 30 minutes of confession every week and that's it, that doesn't send the right message. So ask yourself, how might we offer a little bit more? How might we offer other opportunities for the sacrament of reconciliation? Maybe it cuts into some other responsibilities that the priest has. Can you delegate those things? There are probably really great laity who can take on some of the roles in the parish that the priest is taking on right now. But do you know what I can't do as a layperson? I can't hear somebody's confession. I mean, I guess I could hear it, but I can't do anything about it. But you can. Offering this blessed sacrament is a key to Eucharistic revival, and it's a place of encounter. The third thing we can do is to practice what you teach. We have a lot of places in our parish that we can teach about the Eucharist. Do we utilize all of those places? And if we do, how are we teaching about the Eucharist? Do a catechesis audit. Look at all of the places that you teach. In particular, I put 4 here, but there may be others. Religious education, youth ministry, men's and women's groups, and RCIA are 4 that I can think of, but there are many more, many other groups you may have. Where are you teaching about the Eucharist? Any place you're having Eucharistic adoration or Mass as a part of that group, you are teaching about the Eucharist. So that's Cursillo, that is if you're doing any type of retreat where those things are included, you are teaching about the Eucharist simply by virtue of doing the thing. Anytime we have liturgy, it is catechesis. Anytime we have Eucharistic adoration, there is some catechesis taking place. It might be implicit catechesis, which means catechesis that is done by our actions, but it's still there. So what are you teaching? When you explain the Mass in those settings, you explain Eucharistic adoration at your youth ministry, for example, how are you explaining it? What are you setting it up as? Why are we doing adoration? Poor catechesis can look anything, can look like one of these 2 things, right? Poor catechesis in adoration is, all right, we're going to have Eucharistic adoration. So you kneel, everybody kneel, and then the priest or the deacon comes out with the Blessed Sacrament. Or maybe we just expose it on our own, and here it is. That's poor catechesis. For most people, even if you think everybody in the group knows what's happening, refresh it, refresh it, refresh it. Poor catechesis could also look like this: having a liturgy where, as we're praying, maybe we're in a space or a place where we're not able to have some of the beautiful, accessorization that we have, or liturgical vestments or liturgical items that we would normally have. Are we going out of our way, though, to try to make that space beautiful? I know that there are, again, thinking of youth groups, some youth groups that may do a hike where they have a Mass in the woods. Very kind of a cool thing, very St. John Paul II thing. When we do that, have we brought along little things even? It could be anything of like, hey, the priest on that trip says, I brought with me a relic, though. And we're going to put this relic underneath this makeshift altar. And explaining why you would do that and why there's a history of that in the church. See, now that's good catechesis, because it's explaining why we're doing and how we're doing something within the liturgical action. But look at these places and ask yourself this: where are we teaching about it? How are we teaching about it? And here's the third one: are we failing to teach about it? The teaching of the church on the Eucharist is a perennial teaching. It's for all times and all ages. It is not a 9th grade only teaching. It is not a week 4 in RCIA teaching. It is not the men and women in the men's and women's groups, like they get it, there are men's and women's groups teaching. It's not. It's an all of the time. Anytime the Eucharist is out, there's a brief catechesis about Eucharistic theology. And it's something we have to teach every single year and continue to hit that and invite people places to dig more deeply into that. Now, intellectual assent is not the only way that we're going to have Eucharistic renewal, but it's important. We can believe with the heart, yeah, my Lord and my God, I believe that that is you. But at the same time, we have scientific questions. We have theological questions. We have ecumenical questions that need to be answered. Are you addressing those things? And if not, how can you address those things? And here's the last piece. The fourth thing we can do for Eucharistic renewal is to adopt a Eucharistic mindset. The Eucharistic mindset says that if we receive Jesus Christ on Sunday, we go out and we are different on Monday. How can I come in contact with the Lord and not be changed? Unless my heart is simply that hard. So when we look at a Eucharistic mindset, it impacts our community, it impacts how we interact with poverty, and it interacts with how we welcome others. Let's talk about that community piece. If your church closed down today, you get off this webinar and your pastor comes in and says, it's over. The church is shutting down. We're going away. Would people in your community care? Other than the Catholics? Would the non-Catholic community care? Or would they be like, oh, what an interesting bit of news. That was a pretty church. I fear that our reception of the Eucharist is not transforming who we are as Catholics into compelling individuals. The Eucharist should bear fruit in our lives, fruits of the Spirit, in fact, joy and peace, love. Do we live those things as Catholics? Or do we find ourselves receiving the Eucharist and then getting frustrated in the parking lot, going home on social media, getting despairing at the state of the world and commenting on a bunch of things in ways that may or may not be charitable, but who cares because those people are online and I don't know them anyway. I read some of this stuff in Catholic groups, my friends. I know that this is not the case. I know that there are daily communicants who are some of the most uncharitable people around. Why? And I know in my own heart, I'll blame myself. I can receive the Eucharist and become so callous. Are we people who are compelling by virtue of the fact that we receive Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament? When we go out into our community, can people have an encounter with Jesus? The ideal is this, that we are so in love with the Lord and so strengthened by the Eucharist that when we encounter adversity in the world, and the world is bleak, don't get me wrong, and there are things that make me mad and make me frustrated and make me want to be uncharitable too, without a doubt. But does the Eucharist say to me, hey, this world is not your home. Fight for what is good, fight for justice, do it with charity, be merciful, walk humbly, but have hope. Have hope. The second thing is how the Eucharist commits us to the poor. That's actually one of the effects that's listed in the Catechism of the Catholic Church of the Eucharist. It says this line exactly. The Eucharist commits us to the poor. When I receive the Eucharist, my heart is conformed to the Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ. What does the heart of Jesus Christ break for? The poor, the marginalized. In the Psalms, it says that God is close to the brokenhearted, saves those whose spirits are crushed. So if my heart is conformed to the heart of the Lord, it means that my heart breaks for that which the Lord's heart also breaks. And the Eucharist does commit us to the poor. Does your parish community have a commitment to those who are poor? And this could happen in any number of ways. And then for you personally, does this commit you to act in a way that is charitable to those who are marginalized, broken-hearted, and in poverty? And the last piece is a sense of welcome. We talked about this earlier, and we're going to bring it full circle. If the Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, as real as Jesus is in the Eucharist is as real as I am right now. I'm not AI generated. I am not computer generated. I'm a real flesh and bone human being. Jesus Christ is wholly and substantially present in the Blessed Sacrament. The accidents of bread and wine remain, but Jesus is wholly and substantially present there. That's life-changing. And if Jesus is God, Savior, who promises life in abundance and life everlasting, I got to bring people to that well. I've got to bring people to know this man. I've got to bring people to the table of the Lord so they can receive him. I want them to know that love. And yeah, it's scary sometimes to do that, but at least it doesn't, it's not, in some of us, it sends us out as evangelists and missionaries, but it makes all of us agents of hospitality and welcome. It means that for any of us, when we walk into church on Sunday, unless we know somebody and we know that they're a member who we might need to call out on some expectations. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you don't call people out. I'm not saying you don't challenge them lovingly. I'm not saying that we don't hold each other accountable. You know, I'm talking about I walk into church and I see a person who maybe is underdressed, who maybe is disruptive, who maybe is on their cell phone. Is my first reaction to be like, I got to go let this person know? Or is there a better way to invite them in and to welcome them and to just assume they don't know anything if I don't know them? How do we have a mindset of welcome? Where if somebody who didn't know anything about Jesus, anything about the Catholic Church, walked into one of our Catholic churches, they would say, I don't know what y'all are doing, but I know there's joy here, and I knew that I felt at home. I felt like people genuinely welcomed me. That's a Eucharistic mindset. Here's the thing with revival, though. The U.S. bishops have wisely said we're in a period of Eucharistic revival. And we're going to prepare. We're going to do everything we can to prepare for revival, to prepare for what the Holy Spirit wants to do. But the truth is that revival is not our work. We can't make it happen. We can't force it, but we can beg for it. And I use that word specifically. We can pray for it, but praying for something and begging God for something in prayer are different. Begging is the blind man, right? The blind Bartimaeus. David, son of God, son of David, have mercy on me. Following and begging, please help me, help me. Even as people try to silence him, please help me. That's begging. I wonder if we're at the point of begging as a church yet. For some of us, we are. And this begging for revival is rending our hearts and saying, Lord, please bring revival to me first. Give me a heart of flesh and not a heart of stone. Help me to receive you in the Eucharist in the ways that I've become callous to it. Help this to no longer be routine, but something that changes me from the inside out. Lord, bring renewal and revival in me. And then after I've prayed that for it in me first, I can start to pray for revival for our church, for our world. I can beg for it. Are we to the point of praying and fasting for this? Are we to the point of saying, you know what, Lent might be over, but Fridays, not only are they meatless, but I'm going to fast for a meal. I'm going to fast from something else with this specific intention over the next year and a half that the Holy Spirit would bring revival to the church in the United States. That's begging for revival, and that's where we're at. So those are the 4 pieces in this slow burn. What is the law of creed and the law of belief? Do you have beautiful liturgies? When you look at your church, are there places where we can encounter the Lord? Are we practicing what we teach and auditing all of the places we teach about the Eucharist to make sure that teaching is accurate and that it's happening? And then finally, do we have a Eucharistic mindset in us as people? And in all of this, we're begging for revival. It's not a matter of if the Holy Spirit will show up. It's a matter of if our hearts are going to be ready for when the Holy Spirit does show up. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen and I'm going to invite Aaron back on. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I am happy to take any and all questions you might have about anything I presented here, about the Eucharistic Revival, about the National Eucharistic Congress, or just whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to get traded to the New York Giants. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Joel, thank you so much. I really have enjoyed listening to you and to all of these, your passion and these really practical things that parishes can put into play. I invite all of you, as Joel said, ask him a question about his presentation or the National Eucharistic Congress, or maybe even share some of the things that your parishes are already planning on doing over the next year, as we can inspire one another. So Joel, one of the things you talked about a lot is changing the culture of your parish. Do you have any specific ideas of what parish ministers can do to begin that process with their parish?
Yeah, I think part of it is defining what you want that culture to be, and sitting down and actually really working through it. This is not an afternoon session or something somebody comes up with. You may even consider bringing somebody in to help out with that, like somebody outside of your parish. I've done this for a couple of different parishes, for example. There's people like me who do that, who come in and sit down with the team for a couple of days and say, tell me a little bit about what do you want your parish culture to be? The Eucharist has to be at the center of that. But let's talk about that. What does your community look like? What do you want to be within this? And that can be very fruitful, because once you know those things, you can work towards making that a reality. And a lot of us don't. And so what happens is whoever's voices are the loudest, or whoever has the most influence in our church, then develops what our parish culture looks like. Or whoever has the loudest influence on our staff develops what that looks like. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that's a not so good thing. And oftentimes sitting down and defining it, and a lot of times inviting somebody else in to help with that is a key part of the process.
And then when that's kind of finalized, so to speak, would that be something that can be shared then with the parish through the bulletin or other means, right?
Yeah, I would say if you say that we have these 4 things that we want our parish to be. We want our parish to be welcoming. Where our parish is Eucharistic. Our parish is joyful. Like let's just take those 3 things. I would say as a priest for the next 6 weeks, you're going to preach and work those into the readings, of course. You're going to preach about those things. This is what this means for us. And here's how we're going to live these things out. You know, we're Eucharistic. So we're going to be adding in exposition of the Blessed Sacrament from Monday through Friday from these times, because that's what we're going to live. And we really want to push people to sign up to fill these hours, because this is who we're going to be in. And you can go through the list, but it's saying this is who we're going to be as a parish, and then reinforcing those things as a staff, because there's always the pull back to like, oh, the way things used to be or how we used to do things. And it requires really kind of candor and some uncomfortable conversations to say, hey, we don't do things that way anymore, like, because we do things this way.
Okay, great. That gives us some good ideas here. Got some questions coming in. A person who is a DRE says, I'm planning to offer a class on the Eucharist as part of the Eucharistic Renewal. Would you consider this a good place to start to foster the Eucharistic Renewal?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and offer the class, and then I'd encourage you to kind of, you know, branch that out too and say, how can you offer that or invite other ministries into that? Offering classes and teaching it can be really profound. I think one of the things I'd encourage everybody to do when you offer those classes that we found to be really effective in our work in the revival so far is to key in on Eucharistic miracles. People are fascinated by Eucharistic miracles. Blessed Carlo Acutis obviously put together a very large collection of Eucharistic miracles, and you can find that online. You can get like big poster boards with it, but make that a part of your class and look at how you can expand that throughout your parish too. But I think that type of thing, it's a great place to start teaching and helping people understand what our belief is as Catholics and providing them a space to ask questions.
Great. Do you feel social media can help bring about this revival or hinder it? Should we lean heavily one way or the other?
I think it could do both. We have a social media at the National Eucharistic Revival, which you can follow on our Instagram and Facebook, which we're trying to make a place that teaches and inspires and is uplifting. So I think we do things like that. Yeah, like it can pique curiosity and invite people just to consider the Eucharist in a different way. So our target really is Catholics, any Catholic who might come across that content and get interested, but we're seeking to encourage and inspire. I think where it can become detrimental is not in what is intentionally posted, like by parishes or by apostolates or organizations, but just in how we talk with one another online and some of the conversations there. That's where things can sometimes be challenging. And I'm not just talking about Catholics, you know, arguing about something about liturgy online or things like that. I'm talking about just in how we conduct ourselves online. You know, if people see pictures of us up at the parish and then a bunch of comments angry about something, they might say, well, what does that mean? So that's why I think it can be helpful. And it can present some challenges if we're not careful.
So there's been a lot of, focus and build up to this third year of the revival. And then what, Joel? Like, what happens after this?
Yeah, so there are 3 phases in the movement of the Eucharistic revival. The first is what we're in right now, which is the diocesan year, preparing diocesan offices to support parishes. Really, the hinge year is the year of the parish, which is coming up in from June 2023 to June 2024, where we're going to be inviting parishes to look at some of these practices and evaluating how they foster Eucharistic revival at the parish level. And then the third year is the year of mission, where we're going to be inviting people to go out and invite them back in to their parish, which I think is going to be critical. Within this movement, there's a moment of the National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis, July 17th through the 21st. You can find more information about it at eucharisticcongress.org, where tens of thousands of Catholics will gather to be encouraged, to encounter the Lord, and then to be sent back and to really be equipped and trained for how we live this year of mission. And then beyond that, this is sort of a moment that we are hoping catalyzes a renewal of culture within parishes. So we get back to who we were meant to be. Like we don't live in, live in revival moments all of the time. Revival is continuing and it is ongoing in specific moments. But the goal of a revival is to set us back on course, to right the track, to remind us who we are. We're not trying to create something new here. We're trying to revive it, right? Like to bring back that which was and to bring it back anew. And I think that's the key point that we're looking at. So beyond this, the hope is that parishes would lean into their call and mission as Eucharistic, as sacramental centers where people are nourished on the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, and then are sent out to be that light in a dark world.
Wonderful. Well, it's very hopeful. That's what I feel from all of this, and I hope others too do also. So Joel, thank you so much for spending this time with us, for sharing all of these great insights. And as always, we always offer our webinar attendees a discount here. We have your two books, Beginning Well and Chasing Humility, as well as some books that apply to the Eucharistic Revival. We have a new Ave Guide to Eucharistic Adoration. You mentioned the Tim O'Malley books that we have in English and Spanish. We have regular editions as well as bulk editions in which you can purchase them for $2.99 for 100 or more copies for parish opportunities. Joel, do you want to say anything else about this?
No, I did say those are all great books to pick out and
Okay.
to read through without a doubt.
Wonderful. And just use code webinar 0418. I also wanted to share with all of you that we are beginning a new Ave Explore series. You perhaps have seen this on social media or through email. And the focus on this one is on the Eucharist. Joel is going to be a guest on one of our podcasts. Sister Alicia Torres, who's the managing editor of the emails that we get for the Eucharistic Revival, Tim O'Malley, just a wonderful group of people who do exactly as you have mentioned, to transform or to educate and to inspire. So I invite all of you to follow along with us for Ave Explorers. Joel, thank you again. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing with the National Eucharistic Congress. If I don't see you before, we'll definitely see you in July of next year. And I invite everybody to join us next week. Rachel Kalaki is going to be talking about how healing, how a community can help people heal from sexual addiction. She has written a new book called Love in Recovery, published with us. So I invite you to join us for that too. Otherwise, I thank everybody for being here. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Joel.
Take care.
Bye-bye.